My name's Stephen Downey, and you are very welcome to episode 47 of the Mindful Living Guide, the podcast that brings mindfulness into your everyday life. You've had such a break from the podcast. I just want to give you an update on what's been going on. So back in March, I took a break to hopefully write my book. I thought it would be all finished by now, but unfortunately, we've had a few stumbling blocks over the last few months, and we're working through them. But I am said that I wanted to get back and start recording a few more episodes of the podcast because it's where my passion is. I really love talking to people and just chatting about mindfulness, about mindset, about self-care, compassion, all those great things that we often leave behind when we're hard on ourselves. And our first week back is a great example of that. I'm chatting to a lovely lady called Sinead Kennedy. She's a relationship coach, a psychotherapist, and she talks us over a lot of stuff about our relationship, but not just in building relationships with other people, but starting with herself and getting to know her inner self and those challenges that many of us have to overcome in life to build a great relationship with ourselves. So it's a lovely, lovely episode. I really enjoy talking to Sinead. She's a lovely, lovely person, and I really hope you get something from it too. So please sit back and enjoy this week's episode of the Mindful Living Guide. I am excited to have Sinead Kennedy on the show today as we return back from an extended break. Sinead is a relationship coach. She works with women who want to break free from toxic relationships, build confidence, and attract the right partner. Sinead is also a qualified psychotherapist and works with people struggling with anxiety. Sinead, you're so welcome to the Mindful Living Guide.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been great, and I just love the fact that I took an extended break there for a while from the show, but that there's always people out there that I'd love to chat to, and I really appreciate that you got in contact with me to come on the show and chat about yourself and your own journey as well. And when we were kind of chatting before, and one thing that kind of really jumped out at me is that you were saying that mindfulness was what got you started on your journey into where you are now. Do you mind bringing us back there, and we'll start off with kind of what mindfulness meant to you at the very start and where it came from?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think anybody, well, most people that go into kind of helping other people tend to come from having I suppose, a struggle that they've gone through themselves. And for me, mindfulness was kind of the first step of my own kind of personal development or healing journey, if you want to call it that. Um, but I went through a period of time where I felt quite lost in my life. I was in a job where I was being bullied by somebody. And I just was looking for something, I knew something had to change. I was riddled with anxiety, um, to the point where I was having panic attacks quite frequently. And I think it just kind of came to a point where I was like, something has to change, but I don't know how or what. And I think my confidence was so low from, I suppose, my experience with bullying as well, that it was like, oh God, like what is that first step and where do I go? And a person in my life is a life coach. He's actually my stepfather, but, and it was interesting because he would always kind of spout stuff about positive living and all of that. But I think I was in a place where I just wasn't ready to hear that.
Yeah, it's so important that you have to be ready to listen to this stuff. If you're not, it just doesn't flow. It doesn't come.
Exactly, exactly. And but then I suppose I reached a point where I was just like, look, anything to change where I'm at,
Yeah.
because yeah. And I suppose he was quite big into mindfulness, and it was something that was talked a lot about in my house. And I suppose I thought, well, sure, let's give it a go. And
Yeah.
I started kind of reading a little bit about it,
Mhm.
following things on social media, and meditating. And then and I suppose the whole concept behind it as well of like being more in the present, because I think when you have an anxious mind, you're always thinking about the future and the what ifs, and all of these scenarios play out in your mind all of the time. And you spend so much of your time in the future that living in the present was something that was so alien to me. I didn't know what that even meant. So yeah, I think then mindfulness was this yeah, as I said, the first stepping stone into kind of trying to live a more peaceful life.
It's
Yeah.
it's amazing though that so many people feel that they get to kind of a low part in their life and they're searching for something, and that like I kind of similar kind of thing, that I had a very low time in my life, and when I literally was having a lot of anxiety attacks as well in work, and I ended up in hospital, and that's where I kind of said, right, I need to do something, and that's where mindfulness suddenly came along. And
Yeah.
I always think it just arrives at the time when it's meant to arrive. It gets there.
Yeah.
And so you went on, you did a course then in mindfulness then as well, didn't you? Or
Yeah. Yeah. So I suppose I'd seen how putting some of it into practice, although I was, I suppose, a novice, if you want to say that. I don't know. We're always practicing.
we're
We're
all
always,
big, exactly. We're all beginners.
yeah. And so I wanted to learn more about it. And I suppose it was helping me. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe if more people knew about this or whatever, then maybe it's something that I could help other people with too. So
Yeah,
I did a course with, I think it was the Mindfulness Institute of Ireland, in the therapeutic use of mindfulness.
fantastic. So you had to bring that
But
into your own work and your own practice then.
yeah, exactly. I suppose I hadn't trained as a psychotherapist then, so it was again a stepping stone into that for me as well. But that those few days of doing like really intensive mindfulness training and seeing how you can bring it into every area of your life. It doesn't have to just be sitting down and meditating for hours, that you can, take those mindful moments in the day that really help your mind to
And that
change.
that's such an important part of it as well, is that I think one of the big barriers to mindfulness is that people think that it's an extra activity we do as part of our day, where the real magic comes when we start integrating into it, and and our approach to life, and
Mm.
how we're responding to those things around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think I remember saying to somebody years ago, like, how many of us kind of go, and I used to definitely be one of these people, you're walking to work or whatever, and it's so autopilot, you forget, you don't really remember even how you got there and what route you took, what you saw, what kind of um, things were in your surroundings in the day, because you're so caught up in your own head. And like, even having music on all of the time, I know that that can be therapeutic for people, but I think for me it was a very much kind of like not living in the present. It was okay, whereas now I can walk and kind of listen to the birds and listen to nature, and it really helps ground me. But these are just such simple things that actually really change your life.
Yeah, it's amazing that, like, I think that autopilot that kicks in all the time, it's we can miss so much in life. When I used to work in the city centre, I used to go and walk every day, and I used to challenge myself to just find something new each day, and I do the same loop every single day, but just to
Yeah.
just kind of look, and it's when you just kind of create that heightened awareness. It's amazing so many things that happen, because I think our autopilot is it's when we're deep in the mind, and we're not really thinking, but that awareness kind of like, allows us to kind of think outside the box and outside what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And being more, trying to be more in our bodies as well. We spend so much time in our heads. And I, again, was definitely one of those, to the point where my mind was buzzing all of the time. And I mean, I know I got to a point where I was like, I need this to end. Like, I don't know how to, I'd lived my life for quite a period of time like that I didn't know what it was like to have a peaceful mind, you know. But
You're
I
constantly
suppose,
thinking of all the what ifs and the other
yeah,
scenarios. It's
and
I'm reminded of there's an old Buddha teaching called the Buddhist teaching called the tale of the two arrows, and the whole idea behind this is that if someone's shot with an arrow, there's obviously an injury and there's pain from that. But what we as humans often do is that we shoot ourselves with multiple second, third, and fourth arrows of all the consequences and all the catastrophizing and overthinking scenarios and thinking, and that many times when something goes wrong for us and what can build anxiety within our bodies is that it's all those what ifs, it's all those extra scenarios that we're thinking
yeah,
about, and that's one great thing I find about mindfulness as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I was definitely a cool. I definitely did that to myself and kind of yeah, the like, especially when you're living your life in the future all of the time and
Yeah.
you're thinking about all the what if thoughts, you're, you think you're trying to prepare yourself for the worst case
Mm.
scenario, but really you're just living it again and
Yeah,
again and again.
you're creating that scenario in your mind each time.
Oh, definitely. And I
Yeah.
mean, our minds don't know the difference between what we visualize and what's happening in the here and now. So you are literally like your body is responding as if it's happening all the time. So your nervous system is just, in that kind of fight or flight survival response all
Mhm.
of the time. And that's how I lived for, yeah, a long time.
So things have changed. It's
Things
obviously
have
that's not
changed.
the way you live your life anymore. And you've gone on and you said you trained in psychotherapy and you're now a psychotherapist helping people with relationships. And one thing I when I was looking up at some of the parts that you work on, and one thing that I think will help an awful lot of people on this call or on this podcast episode is people pleasing. Would you be able
Yeah.
to talk about people pleasing and how like the effect that has on people? Because I'm from one, I am 100% guilty of always. I think no for me has always been one of the hardest words in the world to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And similarly, I would have been the same.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I think it depends. I mean, for a lot of people, maybe definitely for me, I think maybe being the eldest in my family,
Right.
it was I was always kind of looking after maybe other people and putting my needs last.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, people pleasing is definitely something that a lot of people struggle with.
Mhm.
Um,
What
I mean,
advice would what advice would you have for someone that's looking for help um to I think when we say try to set boundaries and for people pleasing, a lot of people think it's literally portcullis comes down and it's no. How would
yeah,
you advise them to gradually build kind of the skills to not people please anymore?
yeah. I mean, nothing is black and white, and I think we get caught in that, like
Okay.
real black and white thinking that, like, okay, if I'm learning to say no, it's no.
Mhm.
When when really, I mean, your boundaries are going to look different for each relationship that you have, um, and that's okay. But I think with practicing, I suppose it's accepting that it's going to be uncomfortable, to begin with, particularly if your boundaries are non-existent, and trying to think about your own needs. For a lot of people, if again maybe that's something that you've never really thought about, um it's always been about other people and their needs, that it can be really difficult to even maybe detach yourself from other people and think about yourself as an individual and what your needs look like, not your family's needs, not your friends' needs, but like your needs as a human being, and being able to look after them, and with setting boundaries and with being able to say no, and with practice, and as I said, kind of not thinking about it in a really black and white way, but like, how can I learn to express my opinion a bit more? how can I learn to um uh, yeah, contribute to conversations. Maybe sometimes people take a step back because they think that's what people want the space to talk, when maybe there's a part of you that wants to be involved in that conversation too. um yeah, I mean, thinking about, I suppose, what your own needs are and how you might be able to kind of look after them. Does
And
that make
it's absolute sense. It's like but it's the type of stuff that when we don't think about it, like we just take it for granted that it's always going to be this way. But there is subtle differences that we can bring into our life, that
sense?
will help with this. And it's like when speaking to people like yourself, about kind of what kind of things we can do, to embrace that. Um, the and like it's I know like you work with a lot of people from a relationship point of view as well, and from
Yeah,
relationship coaching, and I'm sure a lot of that is about, is it would I be right in saying it's about finding your own identity as well? um
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think your relationship with yourself is a very good indicator of the relationships you allow into your life. I mean, if you have beliefs about yourself that are negative, then you tend to tolerate behaviors and people that maybe affirm those negative beliefs to you, or kind of, I suppose, a good example, like in my life, one of my kind of negative beliefs that are limiting beliefs that tend to kind of come up is that I'm stupid. It was just one that I used to have. And then I would allow people to treat me in that way.
right.
Similar to the person in work that was bullying me. That's how I used to feel, but I used to allow that behavior because that's kind of how I felt about, or what I feared about myself
So
too.
it's like having that thought is, and then allowing it is justifying the feeling that you're having within yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Reaffirming, like
Reaffirming,
engrossing
yeah,
that
yeah,
in. Yeah. Yeah. But if you're unaware of it, I suppose it's really easy for me to talk about that now when I talk about, when it's kind of on reflection.
yeah,
But in the moment, sometimes that can be very difficult, or it's unconscious. You just know that there's an unease within yourself, and you're not living in the way that you want to. And sometimes it can be difficult to kind of unearth all of that for yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's about concentrating on your inner values and kind of what really does, well, like what life means to you inside. I think, and it kind of goes back to what we're saying about autopilot, that we're kind of, a lot of us are going through life and just going from day to day and just
Mhm.
in that autopilot. We're not stepping back and kind of saying, right, well, what do I really want from this life, and what really matters to me? And I think when we start concentrating on our values, on our inner beliefs, and that's when
Yeah.
we can grow as a person in this way.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about, like, as you say, kind of living on autopilot or being kind of in your anxious mind, like, you're always kind of reactive. You're not slowing down enough to be able to really identify those things. And I suppose that's where sometimes, you know, looking for help in that area can help you to really know what it feels like to slow down, or, you know,
Sometimes we
because
don't even know what we're looking for. That's where,
exactly.
yeah. The
Yeah.
and like a massive part of this, and something I've often talked about on the show a lot, is about compassion and self-compassion. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that comes a lot in a lot of your work, does it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would, I suppose, take a lot from Kristen Neff's work, and yeah, definitely. I mean, again, it's like self-compassion is part of self-care for me anyway. Um, and when we can learn to kind of receive kindness and compassion from ourselves, then it's easier to be kind and compassionate with other people, and to receive kindness and compassion from other people.
It's so important. It's like I was only talking to someone earlier on. There's a practice for people who aren't familiar with called loving kindness within mindfulness,
Yeah.
and it's where we would send want to remember just positivity to somebody. And I know when we start to practice it, we always pick someone who we have a uncomplicated relationship with. So somebody that it's not a family member often. It's someone that you just interact with day to day. And that's easy to start with, to actually send compassion to someone else. But I remember during my own teaching practice, and one part where we had to in our mind, we as we brought that person in, we then brought ourselves in beside that person and put our arm around them and send compassion to the both of us. And
Yeah.
then we gradually let that other person fade away. And I'd say 90% of the people in our class, probably more, probably other 10% probably didn't admit it, but really, really struggled with when we
Yeah.
let that other person go away and try to send self compassion to ourselves. That it's just something I think as humans, we just really struggle with.
Yeah, yeah. And like even, when I work with people around their inner critic and, that really critical, harsh voice that's in our minds, and they think about, you know, what if that was a friend kind of saying that to you, or, when you can see how maybe they would never speak to a friend in the way that they speak to themselves, or that if a friend was saying that to them, that maybe they would fight back, or they would get defensive over it, whereas when it's the voice that's in your mind, it's a little different. There's
Yeah,
kind of like an
we
accept.
let it away with so much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But it's
One, sorry,
sorry, it's funny just you mentioned the loving kindness thing, because I remember doing that in my own when I was training to be a psychotherapist, and I suppose, they were really challenging us in that way, and they told us to pick somebody that, quote unquote, you hated or really disliked,
that's the
and
extreme.
it was it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but I did think it definitely helped with forgiveness work and being able to kind of let go of that resentment or things you're holding on to. A kind of
It's
freeing.
I think it's one of the most powerful things you can do. That sometimes we can hold on to so much hate. There was a time in my life where there was certain people, all right, that I could have spent the rest of my life just out with anger and hate inside it. And unless you can, and it takes a lot of work to
Mm,
gradually send love and kindness to someone you just don't like. I'm actually working on a challenge at the moment. I'm going to be launching soon that, and it's over 75 days where you have to pick a different person every single day to send love and kindness to.
mm.
And you can start with your friends, your family, but when you get to 75 days, you're going to be struggling with people that you like. And so I think it's a good challenge to kind of to gradually build up, because
Yeah,
it's like it's not, I'm sure you found it yourself, it's not easy to like go from sending it to your best friend to sending it to the person who caused you trauma in your life. But it can be so liberating.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I suppose that's what they talk about in forgiveness work as well, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
it's a gift to yourself. It's letting go of all of that anger and resentment that's not really serving you, you know.
The
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that person that you're holding all that anger to doesn't even realize.
Yeah.
It's in your mind. It's not in theirs. Um, the trying to think where we go on there was one thing actually, I was chatting to you just before about this as well. Because I know you deal with as well as adults, you also deal with teens a lot in your work as well, and about anxiety. And I know this is going to be launching when a lot of children are going back to school, and a lot of teenagers.
Yeah.
Um, could you talk just about kind of tips for parenting for anxious teenagers? Because we live in a world where a lot more, I think, I don't know if it's screen time, I don't know if it's the constant kind of information gathering, but
Yeah.
teenagers these days can be very anxious.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a big, I suppose, issue that kind of comes into therapy rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
What
think
I was going to say, would you have tips for just for parents in general for something that just to bring some more compassion into it? Because I know it can be a very stressful time for parents as well as teens.
Yeah, yeah. I think sometimes it can, I mean, let's face it, be frustrating as well. I mean, sometimes um it can be hard to understand. And I suppose because the teenage brain is a lot different from the adult brain, and sometimes we expect them to be able to problem solve and understand in the same way that we do. Um, and sometimes it's about accepting, that okay, you're anxious, and because I suppose a lot of parents, and there's no judgment
Yeah,
here.
it's
It's
everyone's
just
different.
yeah, they want to fix the problem, and ease the anxiety. But sometimes in doing that, it doesn't always work. So how can you be with them in a supportive way without um trying to rationalize or solve the problem all the time? Because sometimes it's just that they're anxious, and that's okay. And I suppose a big thing that would come up around anxiety with kids is like maybe going to school or school refusal. And it's like acknowledging the steps that they're taking as opposed to the whole picture. Like if your child can make it into school for an hour, saying, "Wow, that's really great because I know that that's really difficult for you." Well, I suppose acknowledging their achievements, because school is a difficult place for a lot of kids, without piling the pressure on them, because they if they're suffering with anxiety, there's a lot of pressure on them already.
It can be tough. My wife's actually a primary school teacher, and
Mm,
she uses a great analogy for people are struggling like that with school, and she says like it's like being afraid of flying and being told you have to go on a flight every single day,
yeah.
and
So,
it's fairly hard, it is.
and the way that our minds react to it is like that.
Hmm.
So when you're in anxiety, you're flooded with adrenaline, you're flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. Their body is literally going, get out, there's a fire. So like it is that their internal experience is that's what they're experiencing. But you can support them without pushing, because sometimes when we push, it makes them want to go the other way. Um, and also sometimes it can be hard not to join them in the anxiety as well.
Hmm. Of course.
You know, Anxiety is contageous.
It goes back to what we were chatting to at the start, kind of that catastrophizing and kind of looking at oh geez, if they don't go today, then they'll miss this and then they'll have that. And it's I yeah, I can definitely I've never heard that phrase that anxiety is contagious, but I'm smiling to myself going, yeah, well, that's definitely right.
Well, like, I mean, we feed off each other's nervous systems. So,
Yeah.
uh, what what we say is like co-regulation, right? So, if we can stay as parents as regulated in our own bodies,
Mm-hmm.
minds, as calm as we can, it will help your teenager to regulate too, and bring them down from the anxiety. But
It's
it
like
can be really difficult.
it's like mindfulness by osmosis.
Exactly, exactly. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of studies that have gone into that,
Yeah.
of how we co-regulate. If we can meet somebody, especially parent-child relationships,
Yeah.
if a child can meet parent in a more regulated, calm state, even if the parent is still worried,
Yeah.
if you can try and be as calm as possible, it'll help. It'll
Yeah.
help your anxious teenager too.
Bring them down. Wow, that's not only going to help our listeners; it's helping me. I definitely know it will. The listen, one thing I really wanted to go without talking about was I know you've got some it's this group relationship coaching program coming up. Can you
Yeah,
tell me more about that? Because I know that's something that will benefit a lot of people listening.
yeah. So I suppose, having been a psychotherapist, still am a psychotherapist, relationships are something that is really important to all of us. It was interesting. They kind of they did a study, a real alongside. I think it was in Harvard, where they were talking about the predictors of like your quality of life, and
Mm.
relationships was like number one
Right.
for improvements in your quality of life if your relationships are good. So I suppose I coach single women who are sick of getting into toxic relationship cycles and want to build confidence and to find the right person. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of work on yourself and on relationships and communication and boundary setting and yeah, how you relate to yourself and how you relate to other people.
It's
So
interesting that you're saying about toxic relationship cycles, that we often repeat the same patterns. Would that be right? And would it be about kind of trying to break those patterns?
yeah, yeah, like people say to me, I seem to attract the same type of person. And that's the truth, because um uh, depending on, I suppose, relationships and experiences, maybe growing up, um, relationships to caregivers, that kind of thing. We can repeat patterns again and again. But like what I was saying at the earlier in the podcast, if we're not aware of it, it's very difficult to change. But when we can make the unconscious conscious and we have an awareness, then we can begin to change.
And it all goes back to that awareness, and that's
Yeah,
that's so prevalent all the way through mindfulness is about just bringing, and of course we have non-judgment with awareness as well, because
yeah,
sometimes, and I'm sure you see it a lot, in that when we bring awareness to these inner traits, that the self-critic can get very strong and
yeah,
feel like I shouldn't be doing like that, but sometimes it just is what it is, and that it's by bringing the awareness to it allows us to break those patterns. And there's a great phrase that there was. I went on a retreat a few years ago with a man called David G. If anyone's not familiar with his meditations, I definitely say look up Insight Timer and David G. And he is just amazing. He looks like Santa Claus, and he's got the most velvet voice. But he had a phrase called interrupt or introducing a pattern interrupt. So it's about just breaking that cycle, and just gradually over time, just introducing a very small way of breaking. Obviously you need to bring awareness to it, but then bringing in those abilities just to break those patterns in a safe and safe way.
yeah. And like, how can you heal, I suppose, the relationship with yourself? How can you give yourself the things that maybe you didn't get
Yeah.
that might then come into your relationships too? Because if you are more at peace with yourself, you have a better relationship with yourself, you're going to attract better relationships into your life. Yeah.
It's amazing. There's one question I'm nearly forgetting to ask, and I have to ask it because I've asked it since episode one. And it's a question I ask every single person. And just for anyone who's new to the podcast, the reason I ask the question I'm about to ask is because a lot of people think that mindfulness is one way, that it's just literally you sit in the corner, you meditate, and it's not. And I am just overwhelmed by the different interpretation that nearly every person I've talked to has about this. And the question is, what does mindful living mean to you? So, what would it be like to live a mindful life?
Living more in the present,
Mhm.
with less judgment and more compassion. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's what it means for me.
And it's amazing that so many people take different parts of it. I think compassion is one of the most underrated thing out
Mm-hmm.
there. That it's something that I went on after I studied about teaching mindfulness. I also studied about compassion, and you mentioned Christine F earlier on. And if anyone who's not familiar, I definitely recommend looking her up. There's a great short practice called the self compassion break. It's 3 minute, very short practice that Christine created. And it's brilliant for, again, breaking that pattern, just breaking
Mhm.
down that cycle of anxiety as well
Yeah.
in that. Listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I know that the listeners will really enjoy it. If anybody wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media. So I'm on Facebook at Sinead K Coaching and Sinead Kennedy underscore coaching on Instagram. Or you can just email me the old fashioned way at
What
hello
I,
at K
I
Coaching.
what Oh, sorry. Hello. What I'll do, I'll put, I have a show notes page and I'm going to put all of those details in. So if you are looking to contact Sinead, definitely get in contact with the show notes on this page. There'll be a link in the podcast above. And definitely you will learn so much from Sinead. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too.
So listen, thank you so much for being on the Mindful Living Guide.
No problem. Thanks, Stephen.
So there you have this week's episode with Sinead Kennedy. Listen, thank you again for your patience over the last few months when I took a break from the podcast. I'm always heartened by the amount of people that contact me for each season and say how much that the episodes have made a difference to them. I met some amazing people that say that this podcast has become part of their daily commute. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. We have some great things coming up. I'm working on a great journal at the moment, actually, and it's going to be part of an amazing 75-day course that is coming up in the next couple of months. So I'll have more information on that in future episodes. But for now, listen, please share this episode. It's been a while since we had one out, so I would appreciate getting this out to as many people as possible so we can get the traction up again. While we were on a break, we reached 10,000 downloads on the podcast, which is an amazing achievement and something I'm always grateful for. So thank you so much for always listening. I'm Stephen Downey, and this has been the Mindful Living Guide.